Prideaux of the east side of Madison, who's been a long community activist. And the day is February 26th.
Right.
And this is at my house. I'm Ruth Doyle for Historic Madison Incorporated. Mr. Prideaux, would you start our interview by telling us where you came from, something about your background?
Sure. I was born in Milwaukee in 1918 on April 1st, and I, at the age of 17 days old, I entered Milwaukee County, entered the Milwaukee County Social Services Orphans Home, and where I stayed in and out with different families for approximately a year or a little better, and then I was adopted by a family in Madison, Wisconsin. And before I came to
Okay. You came to Madison at about 1 year of age.
a little over a year old.
Mm-hmm.
I was adopted in Madison in 1919, and on Armistice Day in November, that would be November 11th, 19.
Just a year after the end of the war.
Right. And I was, my name was Raymond King before I came to Madison, and then my name became Robert Prideaux, Robert L. Prideaux. And I lived in Madison ever since then, except for the war years. And I attended Madison schools, public schools, attended Lincoln School for my first year of school, and then I went to Marquette School, the old Marquette School on Williamson Street, and the 1200 block. Then I went to Eastside High attended there for 7th, 8th, and part of the 9th grade, and then I dropped out of school because of the Depression years and went to work in the drugstore and worked for Western Union and part-time, and the drugstore part-time, and also went to school part-time. And from there I got a job in the sheet metal shop of Wolf, Kubley and Hersig, and where I spent up till my war years, when I had to go in service. I stayed there till the war broke out, and then I went to work for Allis-Chalmers in Milwaukee because I had been rejected to go in service. So I went down there and worked for about 2.5 years, and then I was drafted and spent 2.5 years in the service, and then came back to Madison, at which time I had a daughter born to us before I came home, who was about 2 years old when I got home. And
you were one of those fathers that met your children when the babies came running to the door.
I remember her when I came home in the middle of the morning, middle of the night, and she woke up in the morning, looked out her crib, and saw me in bed with her mother, and she really gave us some looks, didn't know who I was.
Yeah.
So then we had another child, and all this time we were still living in the same area, and we was living at 1251 Spade Street, and then we bought a home out on Center Avenue, where we raised another daughter, and we had 2 daughters. We raised our daughters there, and then Lowell and Eastside High, and then went on to college. And I went in the sheet metal business on my return home from service. I decided that I wanted to go in business of my own. So after the war, I started up my own sheet metal business, and I operated that for about 25 years.
The sheet metal business, what does that mean?
Yeah, we done furnace work. We installed furnaces. In them days, we're still installing coal-fired furnaces, and even pot-bellied furnaces, which had no pipes or anything off them, heated from the center of the room. And we were still installing some of them. And also we were installing some oil burners. But we was having tremendous problems with the oil burners because nobody knew how to service them, and factory representatives would come and they'd try to solve the problems, and it really was a rough deal.
I brought you to our house many times to
Yeah.
fix the oil burner and
Yeah.
finally converted it to gas.
Yeah. So we had a business going, and after I'd hurt my back and told that I couldn't do any more lifting, I decided to get out of that business and went into automobile business and as a salesman, and spent the rest of my time working in the automobile industry, which I really enjoyed, and was a very challenging job, one where you had to make your own money because you worked on commission.
Was this one particular car that you sold all the time?
I sold Chevrolets, and then I also sold GMCs.
Mm-hmm.
And I, during my time as a automobile salesman, I got deeper into politics, which I had been into for many years, but and I'd always enjoyed politics, and I got into it deeper, and finally decided to run for an alderman, and I run for alderman of the 16th Ward on Madison's East Side, and I was elected, and I was facing a tough problem because one of the big issues out there was the airport, the noise from the airport, and the danger of the airplanes flying so low. And so I fought to move the
That was the
airport.
time they put up the sign, watch out for low-flying planes.
Yeah, right. And then we used to tell, we used to go on the air and tell people about the problems with the airport, and people on the west side would not believe what we were putting up with. And so
That's true.
we got it onto a referendum, and I was defeated on the referendum on what I wanted to move the airport or do something with it. But things that we wanted to accomplish with the airport did come about, such as I said that the one hill on the north side of the airport should be removed, and they told me that it could not be done. It has been removed over the years, and the instrument landing that I wanted so planes could come in from the north instead of having to circle to the south and come in is in. So then
Is it much better?
it's much better. You bet it's made a big improvement, and I'm still not happy because they built MATC out there. I figured that's still a danger and something that I hope somebody can figure out some way of making it more safe. But I feel it's...
You think MATC is too close to the airport?
I think it's too close to the airport. It's built on the airport property, and the planes are flying over it, almost directly over it. And if they were just off course a little bit, they would be right over the school. And as I go by, I always worry about that. I think that
There's thousands of students there all the time.
all them students that are around there, and what a disaster it could be. And I hope the building's built strong enough to resist any thing that might happen in the line of an airplane crash in that area, as they do happen all over the world, and you got to face that reality.
We've been very lucky, actually.
Right, we've been very fortunate. There've been many planes gone down in the Madison area, but they've all gone down, one went down in the lake, and they've gone down the north end of the airport. They've gone down all over. They've even gone down where housing exists on what we call Myrtle Street now. Mm-hmm. One landed right in the middle of Myrtle Street once and smashed it all to pieces.
That's very close to Oscar Mayer.
Very close. It was almost within 5 or 6 blocks of Oscar Mayer's. And so that was an indication of what can happen. And
you think it's a warning of some kind?
Yeah,
You
really feel that an airport needs to be moved out where it can be away from the public and keep the noise away, and have a rail system into the city to handle the people that want to come in and out, which would be the right way of doing it, and save a lot of pollution with all the cars that have to drive to the airport now. And pollution has become a problem in our day and age, and our environment has been very much hurt by the amount of cars and airplanes and We're hurt by the damage they do to the trees and to the ground and to the sky, but we also have the noise pollution that is very bad. And someday I hope future generations are smart enough to figure out ways of overcoming these kind of problems.
See, apparently people's hearing is affected by excessive noise.
Right, it is hard on people's, and it wakes children up in the middle of the night and parents when from the noise of planes coming in and landing and going out. In this day and age, you have all these express outfits that deliver by night, so they're flying in all night.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll never forget, I stood in a house on Lakeland Avenue, and an airplane was coming in, and she had a big bay window facing towards the lake. And it looked like that airplane was going to come right into that house. That's how low it looked when they're coming over.
Yeah.
Because that's kind of a high spot there on Lakeland, and that plane, if you looked at it from, I don't know what you say, maybe 2,000 or 3,000 feet out, that it looked like it was going to hit that house. That's how low they were.
Wow.
But they have improved them kind of conditions. They're flying higher, and they like to say the instrument landing at the north has helped a lot, but there's still a lot of worries about the airport.
Yes. Well, Sylvie, could you have had a long time interest in politics over and above being on the city council? You've been an active Democrat through many years.
Right. Are you off now?
Mm-hmm. And I want to hear from you.
Okay. I've been an active Democrat. I can start telling about what I've done in the Democrat Party.
Yes.
Okay. You ready?
Mm-hmm.
I was what you might call a progressive in my early days, basically because my grandfather, who was very active in politics, was a LaFollette man from the word go, and he knew old Bob well, and he always talked to me about old Bob LaFollette. So I had a feeling that there was nobody greater than old Bob LaFollette, and as I grew up and became more interested in politics, I found that Bob LaFollette and the LaFollettes were real liberals and concerned people. And so I backed them for election as various elections that they run for governor and the United States Senate. And then I become a Democrat after I come home from the war because a new group had moved in and taken over the Democrat Party. And they were very liberals, and we also had a group called American Veterans Committee, of which most of us who were in the Democrat Party belonged to. And we used to meet at...
it was a very important organization.
And it was. And
because it gathered up all kinds of people like you.
Right, and we had very good times together and done a lot of good. And we built, instead of taking, one of the things that they stood for was they were against a bonus for the soldiers, but they wanted everybody to benefit from anything that the government did. And so they fought hard against a bonus, but for public housing and things like that, and them become reality because of the hard work that organization did, which is now defunct.
Mm-hmm. It was a transitional organization.
Right.
And, people in it got into other political activity.
It was a funny deal, you know. I don't think anybody that belonged to that American Veterans Committee at the time was really thinking about running for an office. But as it turned out, many of them run for an office, and a lot of them were elected and served their state and city and nation well. And I've always been proud of the fact that I did belong to that organization and that they did stand for helping the community instead of helping the veteran itself. And I think that is very important that we got back into the community and lived as a community and not as American Legion or Veterans of Foreign Wars or anything like that.
They kept the American Legion from getting very many
benefits, selfish benefits.
Selfish benefits, and also many of the veterans avoided the American Legion.
Right.
Because they were sort of chauvinistic group.
Right. and but they stood for the people as a whole, and they sure woke up the country. And I worked when I was working in a factory in Milwaukee for Allis-Chalmers. I was a union business agent, you might say. I was chairman of a division which had about 2,500 workers under me. And as that job, and I was getting ready to go into service, we come out with a saying that proved to be true because the government saw that it happened. And that was that we believed that there were 60 million people in this country, and they could work, and there should be 60 million jobs. And because of the union's strong stand on fighting for such causes, that's what happened. There was no depression when we come out. Everything kept running running good, and everybody had jobs.
And we didn't have a whole masses of veterans around begging for food.
Didn't have to sell apples on the corner. There were jobs for everybody that wanted a job, and there was schooling for those that wanted to go to school, and so there was a lot of, which I always give them credit to the unions for their stand and on them issues during the war and before the war that brought this country to full employment and to good wages.
Good times.
And good times, right. And people expanded, the farmers made money, and everybody had a good living, and everybody enjoyed their life, and it was a beautiful days.
Now, when did you retire, Bob?
I retired about 2.5 years ago, which I think was 1987.
Now you can talk a little bit about what you do in your retirement, which is also very busy.
As when I retired, I did not know what I wanted to do, but I was getting up to the age where I thought it was time to retire. My wife had retired, but I had always been, for years I've been helping in a food pantry that existed within our church, and they'd call me and I'd go and pick up food for them, and I'd do a lot of things for them. But then after one day I retired, the woman that was running the food pantry was let go because they couldn't afford to pay anybody to run that job anymore. So I took over that same day, and I've been running the food pantry now for about 2.5 years.
Could you explain what a food pantry is?
A food pantry is a place where we take people have to be referred to us, either by another church, or by one of our ministers, or by organizations, like one is called the First Call for Help, and they take calls or call us and tell us that they have people that need food, and they've interviewed them and ask us to help them. So we give them food, and we try to give them food by the size of their family. We give them everything from diapers to formulas that the baby might have to anything that family needs, and we give them enough food to last them for at least 4 days. And these families
is this meat? What they don't give them fresh meat?
We give them, yes, we sometimes have fresh meat, but it's frozen because we have refrigeration. All pantries don't have enough refrigeration to do that, but we do. We can carry a lot of, we have enough refrigeration that we carry a lot of frozen meats for them, and we give them meats, bread, and all the stable foods that they need. And a lot of times we have extra left over, and we, such as we get, every week we get anywhere from 10 to 15 trays of bread given to us every Monday. And sometimes we don't get rid of all that bread, and so we put it out, and all the people can help themselves to it, or anything else that we're oversupplied with that we know people could eat.
Who provides the food when you go to get it? Where do you go?
Where do I go?
You go to the store?
I go to...
You shop?
We have what they call a second harvest in Wisconsin, and that's an organization that gets all overstocked items of a store or of a manufacturer like Oscar Myers. Say Oscar Myers made 1.5 million of tons of wieners, and they could only sell part of that, and the date was beginning to run out on them, and they couldn't ship them soon enough to be used in the market. Then they would give them to Second Harvest, which in Madison is called Southern Wisconsin Food Bank, and then Southern Wisconsin Food Bank sells that to us for 14 cents a pound. And the reason they charge us 14 cents a pound is to pay for their refrigeration and their help that has to run that organization and their trucks. And so we pay 14 cents a pound, and we buy several truckloads of food from them every week to keep our pantry going. Plus we buy at many grocery stores where we can find the best price on items.
You get special prices?
Some stores give us a little break, and not too many of them give us a real break. But we try to buy wholesale when I can. I look around and keep calling in various places to get hooked up with wholesale organizations, because our pantry is probably one of the largest, if not the largest, in Madison at this time.
How many pantries are there?
There's 38 in Dane County, and I couldn't tell you, I can't remember just how many of them are in Madison, but there's probably 10 or 12 at least in Madison.
Are they connected with churches all?
Some of them are connected with churches and others are not. And I'd say most of them have a church connection one way or another. And some of them only give out food for a day, and others give out, like we do, for 3 or 4 days. Depend, like they don't have no refrigeration and no way of keeping anything, well, they only give them enough canned goods to get by for a day. And then they expect them to get to someplace else for help that they may need.
Well then, you don't sell any food to your customers. Everything is free?
We give everything that they come in and get from us is free. We cannot sell the food that we get. We have to give it away, and we have to have them sign slips.
Now you give them, you have to sign a slip?
A slip or a form. Basically, they sign a form, which is a government form. And the reason I have to sign this government form is because we get some help from the government. We used to get a lot of products from the government. And when I first took over, we'd get cheese, milk, and cornmeal, and breakfast foods. And we could almost get enough stuff to run our pantry. But over the years, the government has cut back on that, and so now we get very little. We get peanut butter and some cornmeal and honey and things like that, and the rest of it we have to buy on the open market. And because we do get anything from the government, we have to have them sign this government form, which says which items that person has taken. And then we can have our other items that we stack, that we bag for them ahead of time.
Just a minute, Bob. What do you suppose that is?
Hmm?
What do you suppose that noise is? Can you hear it?
No, I can't hear that good.
A faint little beep.
Oh, yeah? Oh, that's my watch?
I bet it is, yeah. 11?
Sometimes I can't see to knock it. I have to have somebody else do it for me. Sometimes at night I try to turn my, see what time it is, you know, and I punch that thing, and I must have pumped it and hit that beep on there.
The beep for our listeners is just from Mr. Prideaux's watch.
Yeah.
It's an alarm of some kind.
Time to be doing something.
Yeah. Well, now to get back to the subject at hand, who provides the money for your pantry and all the pantries that you?
Well, basically our money comes from our own church. That is not we're not a funded item to say within the church, but people can, in their pledges, can make a donation to the food pantry, and then that money then is given to us to buy food with for the people. Also, we have support from other churches on the outside that beside our own, and
Other Methodist churches?
well, no, we don't get any more support from Methodist churches, but we got Presbyterian churches, Catholic churches, and about any kind of denomination you want to say. Jewish synagogues give us food, and we go and pick up the food from them whenever anybody calls and says that they have food for us for our pantry. And it's very interesting to go to some of these places. I just a week ago or so I picked up food at Blessed Sacrament, and they had service in the morning there. And when the people come out of the church, they brought their bag of groceries down and give it to me at my truck. And
you had the truck parked in front of the church?
I had it parked in front of the church, and they all come out and come down and give it to me. What do they call that, a mass that they have in the morning?
Mm-hmm.
And then the people come down, they all had a bag of groceries and handed it to me, and I put it in my truck and took it. Very impressive. Plus they also give me about $100 in cash on top of all that people figured I could buy, and they were too old to carry, or
they didn't need.
For one reason or another, they give me cash,
Mm-hmm.
which we get from a lot of churches. We get a lot of cash from them to help run the pantry. But everything in our pantry is volunteer. There's no paid, not even my gas is paid for by the church. Everything is donated that goes into that food pantry.
This is a nationwide phenomenon, I gather now.
It is. And one of the problems in Madison is that we have a high employment rate to speak of right at this time. But that employment rate is misleading because the people are working for $4 and $5 an hour. And at them kind of wages, they cannot make enough money to pay their rent, let alone buy food for their selves. And their rent is probably running them anywhere. I don't think I ever heard of anybody paying less than $300, and some of them are running $400 and $450.
Even for the little bitty apartments.
For them little apartments that they're living in. And because they know that these people are struggling and cannot get anywhere they want to, they can get good rent out of them people. And they got to pay it or they're out on the street. And so it's a very tough situation because of that, and what the government calls full employment, which is should be a part-time job. Why these people have to come to pantries to get food enough to get by for the month, and there's no ifs and ands about it.
When they're working, a lot of times they don't get any benefits on their.
And they have no
jobs.
Benefits. And
No
some
medical help or.
No, and some of these people come in and they tell us, the problems they're facing with medical bills, and them people may have a job making $6 or $7 an hour, but they can't pay off their medical bills, and the doctors are on their back in the hospitals, and they got to pay them bills. And of course, that's one of the great things I always was proud about being a Democrat, because we had a United States Senator from Minnesota whose name was Hubert Humphrey. And he thought we ought to have socialized medicine back in the 40s and 50s. And, if we'd had that, just think what that would have done for this country. And now it's the doctor has got the power and the people have no power. And they are really taking the people in the hospitals.
So people are neglecting their medical responsibilities. They just aren't.
One of the first things I learned by being a member of the American Veterans Committee, I had a friend who was in there, and he told me, he said, I cannot afford, even in them days, he said, I cannot afford to take care of my children's teeth right, because it costs too much money even in them days. He said, we've got to have something. And that's always stuck in my mind, a simple thing like their teeth, they cannot even get them taken care of because of the high cost of having them bills taken care of, or them problems taken care of. And so you can see how over the years people have been neglected, and their health standards are not as great as they ought to be in this country.
Well, even in a city like Madison, which has about the lowest unemployment rate of any place that we read about, there is this problem which is being met to a very large extent by organizations such as yours or the Salvation Army.
But even then, we can't meet them. We can only give them temporary help. There's these people cannot even qualify for loans. And in this day and age, a lot of the banks won't even allow them to have bank accounts. And so they got that problem. They have to cash their checks and pay a high price to have them cash because they do not have, can't deposit a check in the bank when they do get one because of their low incomes, or because they're getting federal or state money and it's low. They don't want them.
They don't want small accounts, is
small accounts, that small account in their banks, which is going to be used up by the end of the month. They want big accounts, savings.
That's something like I wasn't aware of.
It's a very bad situation, and that's why is the way down on Park Street. There's a place where you can go and cash checks.
Yes. Now, what is that? I've seen that sign. Come in and cash your check.
They charge you a good proportion of that check to cash checks for you, and a lot of people have to go to places like that in order to get their checks cashed. And it's a very discouraging thing to think that people cannot have a better standard than that.
You'd think the employers might pay them in cash if they're giving them small amounts.
Yeah. Well, I can remember back when I first started to work, a lot of employers were paying people by cash. But then, we got one of the greatest things that I've seen in my time was come alive was Social Security. And because of Social Security, they had to keep better records of what they were paying people. And but that Social Security, started out at 1/2 of a Social Security started out at 1/2 of a % of your wages, and even then people complained about it, said it would never be there when they got ready to retire, and the people still say the same thing today. So
they're worried about it,
and they're worried about it not being there. But one
now
thing,
they have to pay about 6 or 7%, don't they?
Yeah, now it's up to, I think it's 7% or close to that. And and I always said all my life.
Don't pull them,
No, I'm trying to
you
record.
tape over it now.
This is record. Yeah, that's right.
You don't want this anymore, the speaking
Oh
of
yeah,
them?
I want it, but
I always thought about how wonderful it was that we had a system like that allowed a mother to keep her family together and to allow them children to go on to school and get their education. If for no other reason, Social Security was well worth what we paid into it, better than having them go on relief, which we had in them days. And speaking of relief, back in the days when I worked in the drugstore, people that now live in Maple Bluff and Shorewood, many of them people, I can remember delivering prescriptions to them during the Depression, and they were down and out. They didn't, even them people. Now they're living in the best part of the Madison. But in them days, I was delivering prescriptions. The money come from the Dane County itself to pay for the services, pay for their medicines and their doctors. And
it was part of the relief program.
Yeah, it was a relief program, strictly a relief program carried on by the county. And of course, if you were working by the guy that was getting that relief, he was a dog, he was really somebody, because he shouldn't be getting that. He ought to be out working, he ought to be doing this and that. And of course the same thing exists today, People got the same, the attitudes haven't changed. I'm 72 years old now, will be shortly, and I don't think the attitudes of the people have changed much. They still carry on that the other guy is a loafer, or too many people, I should say, feel that way, and that's what.
They talk about people who prefer to stay on welfare instead of working, and they don't realize this whole thing we've been talking about, medical care.
Yeah,
the
you see,
you get.
When they're on that medical care, and they get assistance, they get all their medical bills taken care of. But if they take one of them $4 an hour jobs, then that stops right now. And so they have no medicine, no medical care, no medicine.
Parents of young children have to be very careful.
And people come in and talk to us about this. What should I do? I would like to take that job. but I don't know how I can afford to do it. And this is a real problem. And it's time that this country wakes up to the fact if we're going to be liberals, we ought to be liberals, and we ought to be fighting for them kind of causes and get back on track.
Not worry about our defenses.
That's right. Don't have to worry about buying big bombers and stuff like that. Take care of the people in this country and around the world. We probably could take care of the people around the world and stop a lot of the starvation that's going on if we were get out of the war zone and start being human beings again.
And of course, we also are a very wasteful economy. The food that you give out to people is a direct way of meeting that, but people like me that eat in restaurants waste
Yeah.
tons of food every day.
Well, that's an interesting point, Ruth. In one of our studies that we've been going through recently, they pointed out how if you took these 18-wheel semi-trailers and run them from New York to Los Angeles, and you had them back to back, clear across the country, and you had them 6 rows wide, that would be an amount of food that this country wasted in 1986. And the thing is worse than it was then.
Mm-hmm.
And so you can imagine how much food that would be that we destroy each year. And it's time that
Could do a lot of good.
it could do a lot of good, and it shows that we're too wasteful and we're not concerned about our environment enough.
I found at Christmas time it was particularly offensive this year to go and see the mountains of stuff that was for sale at Marshall Fields, for instance. You could hardly get around in the store, they had so much.
Oh,
At the same time that we've been worrying about these African countries where people
Sure.
are starving and don't have any clothing.
Yeah. Of course, one thing we do when you speak about Christmas time is that we put on a meal. I started a program in our church several years ago, maybe 10 years ago or so, and we feed anybody that's alone, elderly, or in need. We feed anybody that walks in our door for Thanksgiving, Christmas, and Easter, and we give them all the food they can eat.
No questions asked.
No questions asked. And we get a
Do you
lot
get
of,
good crowds?
we served 250 meals for Thanksgiving, plus we delivered over 100 meals on top of that. So we served a lot of people on that particular day, and this is true any one of them 3 holidays. And if it's really bad weather on one of them days, it really makes your old heart ache to see people walk in there half froze or sopping wet from walking in the rain or whatever it may be. The adverse weather conditions, these people still come because they're hungry, and everything's closed on them days, and so we do a real service by feeding people on them days.
They need some company too.
And then the company, we allow them to sit around, and we try to have entertainment for them during the meal time. And we serve probably for about 3 hours or so. And it's kind of an interesting thing. We have a lot of people from our own church that help with that meal, but we have many people come from all different churches in Madison, or even I know people come clear from Spring Green to work on one of our meals. I think that it's such a great thing that they drive clear in and work for every one of our meals. You don't have to call them and ask them to come. They're there when it's meal time, and on particular days they're there bright and early and work till we close up maybe about 4 o'clock time. They're all cleaned up and out of there. So we serve them turkey and we serve them ham.
Do you have a catering service that does the cooking?
No, we do all our own cooking for them meals, so we can cut down the cost of putting on the meal. We do our own cooking, and I buy, like turkeys, I'll buy them at Thanksgiving time, and I'll buy enough so that and freeze them, keep them froze to run through Christmas, because at that time merchants are selling their turkeys for a loss.
They're trying to get rid of them.
Yeah, well, they were trying to draw the customers into their store, and they draw me in, and so I grab all the turkeys they let me get away with. And when they tell me I can only have 1 or 2, I say, well, I have to make all them trips back here or bring a bunch of friends, So then I usually end up getting all the
Mhm.
turkeys I want and get out the door.
How many turkeys do you use?
Oh, we use probably around 15 to 20 at a meal.
Hmm.
So I try to buy about 40 to 45 turkeys at Thanksgiving time. And I wait till the sales get on, and then I go out and buy them.
And your dinner would be different from the ones that they have it for the drunks and the.
Yeah,
You have families that come.
we have families come there, and we have and single people, and we would not, and we don't ever have a problem with anybody that's been drinking that I know of.
Methodists don't tolerate any drinking.
Well, they do now. They're more liberal.
Yeah.
They're real liberal on that subject nowadays, but they used to be very strict. But we would do something. I don't know what we'd do if somebody come in.
You never have had the problem.
No.
Doesn't rise.
We have people that are disturbed mentally, but when we can handle them,
Yeah.
we get them calmed down, and we've done this long enough that we know how to help that person that's mentally disturbed. And of course, that's one of the real problems in this day and age, is that the institutions are letting people out that should be institutionalized and needs to be there, and they put them out on the street, and then these people, a lot of them turn to alcohol or drugs or something
Whatever they can.
to live, and it's a very bad situation.
Now you get some of those people come to your pantry for
Right.
food,
Yes.
but they have to have a place to live, a place where they can use the food.
We
a
also,
kitchen or
yes, like this morning, before I left, I had several calls, and two of them that I took were for people that have no cooking, no way to
Mhm.
cook. And so we go through our pantry, and we pick out food that does not need to be cooked. Like we give them tuna, we give them canned pork and beans, and we go through and make sure that we can, and give them bread, and we make up meals for them, or give them canned ham, something they can eat cold. We make sure that we give them enough food. We give them a big bag of groceries to get by with, and like right now we have apples, so we're giving out apples to them, and we give
so
them,
they can get something to sustain themselves.
right, and we give them applesauce, and we give them pears or peaches, and so they can eat on them items, and we give them a box of crackers. And as we walk through, we can always find enough items to get by for that person that doesn't have no place to cook, or may not even have a place to live. He might be.
Where do the people eat? Do they eat in the
Some of them eat
in the bus stops? And
well, they won't allow that anymore, and a lot of them are eating on the street, or they're eating in Capitol, and places like this where they can sneak in and stay.
get out of the cold.
And yeah, and a lot of them people spend their whole day sitting around in the state capitol because they have no other place to go till they can get into a shelter at night, which Grace Episcopal Church has, which all the churches in Madison, or at least 30 of them, help out on. And like I work there once a month. Our church has that, and I go once in a while with them and help take care of the people there at night. And they have room for about 40 people that they can sleep down there at night, and then they give them a little breakfast in the morning, and then they're out on the street again. They have to be out by 8 o'clock in the morning. And
Is this pretty much a pattern, the way it is in other cities? It must be worse, I suppose.
I was in Minneapolis not too long ago, and I couldn't believe the number of people that were lined up on the street waiting to get into one of them shelters for a night to sleep. And I guess if you stop and think about it, you can look on television and see plenty of places around the country where they have them. And speaking of that, I was talking with a friend of mine recently who had been in Atlanta on a few days after Christmas. And he told me they served over 5,000 meals in a Coliseum down there on Christmas Day to people who are needy. Over 5,000. Just think of the work they had to go into doing that.
For providing food.
And provided food for them.
They need the loaves and the fishes.
Because see, the weather's better down there, and so they're getting all them
People wander into it.
wander in, and I forget how many places he told me they had for shelters in that area. But it was fantastic, the number of shelters they had and problem they have in Atlanta, you know. And you even think maybe Miami and them too probably got the same kind where they got warm weather. And these people, one way or another, get themselves down in that kind of a climate because they can sleep outdoors if they have to.
That probably keeps people away from Madison in the wintertime.
It does help a lot.
Just, we can
you
just
know, there's a
dream
lot
of-
of people in the city of Madison that are sleeping in dumpsters now. The dumpster is something that is sitting out back of a store, and they throw all their garbage in there.
There's food in the
And-
dumpsters too.
And there's food in there, and a lot of these people are climbing in them and sleeping at night because they have no other place to go, or they're sleeping in a cardboard box somewhere. That's how serious the situation is.
Then they find families sleeping in a car.
Yeah.
I know there was a car parked over on Monroe Street for a couple of weeks one time, and then the police finally started investigating and discovered that a family was living in that car.
Yeah. Well, this happens all over the city, where you might not hear about it, but it's constantly going on. That the police now are more alert to them conditions, and they get them into a shelter, or they get them a voucher to get them into a hotel for the night or something, and try to get that family straightened out. We even have to help people with gas for their vehicles because they don't have no money, and
They're on their way to someplace
they're
else.
on their way going through Madison, and they're up against it. And so
You give them, do you give them cash for gasoline, or do you?
we never give nobody any cash. If they need gasoline or they need a prescription filled or any of that kind of thing, we find out where they're open, and then we call and make arrangements for them to pick up the gas at that place or prescription at that drugstore. But we do not hand out cash in any way. We do give a few bus tokens, but we've had some abuse of that, and so we have really pulled that in. But we do try to help with any need they have that we can possibly do.
If you give them clothing, is there clothing available?
We don't have clothing on, but that's one thing we're working on, is trying to form a unit in downtown Madison with all the churches in that area. They move a pantry out of the basement where we exist now into some store downtown that we'd be able to stay for several years, and then have clothing and social services in there and everything else that they really need that we cannot provide for in there in the basement like we are operating out of now. I have a small office there, and I have anywhere from 2 to 5 people working every day of the week for me, so you can see how much work there is to be done. And then nobody ever stands around. In fact, most of the time we don't have any lunch because we work right straight through with the amount of work there is to be done.
And the people keep coming.
Keep coming and right up till we close up.
So, and you said in the beginning that it would be a couple hundred people a day today.
No,
100.
yeah, we would feed 100 people today, but we'd have 25 people coming to get the food for them, which we figure we keep a tally of that. We have to. Government requires us to keep a tally of how much, of how big that family is, and so we have a record, and we can count. We add them up every month, and then that's what it'll average. And this is end of the month is really bad. My help down there today was probably really pulling their hair out waiting for me to come back.
Well, do you think that this is a new phenomenon, or do you think we just haven't opened our eyes to what was going on over the years?
I can remember back in the Depression years when I first went to work, after I dropped out of school, I can remember of neighbor kids going to garbage cans, what they had in them days, behind stores, and pulling the stuff out of there to live and eat on.
I can remember people coming to our door when I was a child growing up. My mother fed extra people on the back porch every day. They came. In our hometown, we lived close to the depot, and they would come off the train. But when resident relief came into effect, they all had to go home. They couldn't wander around much.
lived about a half a block from the railroad tracks, and trains done a lot of switching near us. So we always had that kind of a problem. We knew what it was because we'd see these people all the time coming to our house for a handout.
They had a way of marking houses.
Yeah, they knew how to mark them so that the next guy could come to your place and get something to eat.
Mm-hmm.
And we always took care of them. We felt that a man that's really lonely or a woman, and basically in them days it was men that were on the road, but we always had a soft spot for them in our life.
But now they have to stay put if they're going to get any welfare or anything.
Yeah, they got to stay put. And one of the biggest rackets, as far as I'm concerned about the whole thing, is that the county now puts them up out on southwest side, and they put them up in old motels that are really run down traps, as far as I'm concerned. And they'll put a family of 5 or 6 in one of these rooms, and they're paying big money for that, and and there's just no
city
decent
stuff.
place for them to be at all.
New York does that, and big city stuff. They put them in the hotels.
Just terrible rundown places that ought to be condemned, and yet they're paying them landlords big money to put these people up overnight. It seems like society ought to be able to face their problems better than this. It seems like we're pretty lax in our day and age.
Is it getting worse as the days go by, in your experience? Are we getting more and more people? The question is, are they just more and more people aware that they can go to the First Methodist Church and get
Oh yeah. Is there? Well, I guess what you're saying is there more people needing the help?
Needing the help and
Yes.
getting the help. And
Yeah, there's yes, because you see, a lot of people are retiring on Social Security, and they never had a good enough job to get enough money so they can live on. And so if they just got a small Social Security pension, then they're hurting pretty bad too. And so people are living longer nowadays, so you take that with low income, it makes a lot more people available all the time that have to be taken care of.
do you have mostly young families, or do you have single older people?
No, we get a lot of families, tremendous amount of families, but we get people that are older too. We get I'd say 3/4 of people are younger families. Normally, or basically, I guess you could say that they probably don't have a father in that house neither.
Mm-hmm.
And then we probably got about 1/4 of them that are senior citizens that aren't making it. And they're the hardest ones to get to come to your pantry.
Mm-hmm.
Even though they need that help, they
hate to
such
admit it.
pride that they hate to come.
Yeah.
And it's a very touchy situation. And a lot of times I run into people and I know that they need help, and I talk to them and I try to get them to come to our pantry or go to another pantry to get help. And but with the fuel bills and the rent that people got to pay today, it's just a terrible mess.
And if they live in furnished rooms, I suppose a lot of them do just rent a room in some house.
Around Square, a lot of them have rooms up there, and a lot of them rooms don't even have heat in them.
Mm-hmm.
And they live in that cold old place the year around. How they do it, I don't know. I'm sure I couldn't stand it very long.
Yeah. But they pay.
They got to pay. They might be getting some assistance from the county to be there in some cases. I don't know what the standard is on that anymore because it keeps changing, but they will put them up for a certain amount of time. And especially those with mental problems, they will put up in one of them rooms and keep them in there for a considerable length of time.
Do you have narcotics problems?
Yeah, what?
Narcotics problems with people?
Well, we run into that once in a while, but that's not average. Fortunately, I can say that I've very few times have narcotics been a thing that bothered within our pantry.
Mm-hmm.
But it does happen, and you have to deal with it as you have to be firm and you have to handle the situation as it arises. But
It's not your main problem.
no, it's not a real problem.
It may be an exaggeration. The public has an exaggerated view of.
Well, some of these people may be on drugs, but they're smart enough to know that when they come to us that they better be right or they're not going to get anything. They're going to be told that they have to leave. And sure, we get some, but like I say, it's very, very seldom. And I do feel that the drug situation is an item that has taken us away from the real problem.
Mm-hmm.
Drugs itself, you know, we all take some kind of a drug, and I take pills every day. But I guess what I'm saying is that we talk about drugs, but we don't talk about why we have that problem. And that's because people don't have a place to live or food to eat and things, and they turn to what they can to get by with. Them are the kind of people it's easy to lead into them, kind of into drugs, and because what's their hope? What's their future? There's nothing out there for them, and this is a real
Makes them feel
concern.
better. It's in a neighborhood like this, which is quiet, small houses, we are hardly aware, especially since there's no more shopping on the square. People don't go down to the square very often. So we have to hear from people like you that go from your neighborhood into that area to get some idea what it's going on.
Yes, Ruth, you remind me of something when I was on the city council. When I was on the city council, the riots were down on State Street, and I'd be down there. I went down there every day. Every day I was down there, and every night I was down there. I did not want to see any violence if I could help it. And I wanted the police to know that I was there because I was an alderman, and I felt my obligation to make sure that we could try to keep the peace. And regardless of what you did, and sometimes I'd get in a mess where I'd be gassed. I'd get a nice dose of tear gas because you were in a particular spot. But then I'd be, by 11 o'clock or 12 o'clock, you'd be on your way home. And I'd get out on the east side, you know, and it just seemed like you was going from a war area, and you say, well, what the heck, these people don't know what's going on out here, you know?
That's right, they don't.
You can't realize it unless you're there. And then it just seems like you're living in two different cities within a city, you know? And that's what happens. That's one of our problems. The city are so large now and so spread out that you don't know what the other guy's problems are. And the students, you know, I used to talk with them students by the hour, and I'd listen to them, you know, and how right they were, and we wouldn't listen to them. We were so stubborn that we could not understand what the students didn't want to hear what the student had to tell us. And that was real. I'll never forget those days if I lived to be 100, because I felt that was the most trying times I ever had in my life, was watching them students being pushed around down on State Street.
I had an office on Bascom Hill then, sat looking out the window at the clubs and the equipment that went up and down the hill to hit kids, and the Mace.
It's unbelievable how society could not try to handle a problem better than they did in them days.
You know, one of my recent interviews was with the police chief, talking about his early days when he first came here and what he went through, and people. The first parade, the first protest he ever had anything to do with, he told about how people didn't know for sure who he was. He was brand new in town, but and the police came. Some other members of the department came along and began getting their arms ready, their pistols and their clubs. And he said, "Put them away. These people haven't violated any law yet, and we're not going to attack anybody." But he had a hard time.
Well, see, that was and probably still is one of our biggest problems. It's too easy to grab for weapons to solve problems.
That's right.
And society...
Why can't we do something about it? Why can't we get the guns out of people's hands?
Because the reason we can't is because we don't... Ruth, you and I have dropped out of... I still do some work in politics, but I'm not active as I ought to be. And it's because we don't go in there and tell them young people, hey, there's more to this world than what we got. And we got to get back, and I try to attend the meetings now because I feel that you got to start telling. I try to go to the state conventions every year.
They need older people.
They
as
got
well as the young
to,
ones.
I always felt that, I served my time in the party, but I don't feel that way anymore. I figure our time is as important to that party today as it was in the days when we first joined it.
In fact, you and I are in the age group that's the biggest segment of the whole society, practically.
Right. And
We have the most political power.
we have the power if we don't use it. And sit home and not do it. Watching TV is our problem.
Yeah, I know, and that's what I do.
But that's the problem, I'm as guilty as anybody, but and I'm trying to get myself out of that. I'm trying to get more active, and I'm going to work in Loftus campaign, and I'm going to help your son.
That's wonderful.
And
And you have connections with a whole generation that these younger people don't know anything about.
I don't know. They forgot about,
Hmm.
but
But the
Yep.
older people vote.
Yeah, I worked at the polls on election day. I've worked ever since I retired, because in my early days, when they counted ballots by hand, I used to go to the polling place in the 6th Ward Library, and I'd watch them count the ballots. And so I've always had an interest in politics, even since a young kid. And I'd stay there till 3 o'clock in the morning while they was counting to find out who won and what was going on. I always was fascinated with it. So after I retired, I decided that they was asking for people to work in the polls, and so I said I would. And so I've been working at them ever since I retired. And this last election was very bad because there was not enough of issues out there.
Hmm.
But it was interesting to see that out of the small percentage, how big a percentage it was in the senior citizens that were doing the voting, and the younger people weren't getting out. And
Younger people are going to work at their jobs,
going
and
to work, and
the senior citizens are wondering what to do today, so they might as well go over and vote.
and their interest was very high.
Hmm.
When you talk with them, even though in the area I was working at, our thing was only voting for the school board, and didn't have no county issues on to which we'll have in April.
Hmm.
But and so there was very light turnout. And people don't realize how important that school board is to them and what it means for the future.
And right
of
now
their
it's
children.
in crisis
Yes.
all over the country.
I
Even
can-
got the governors worried about it.
I can remember Ruth in the days when I was on the city council and we met in Lowell School. I often think about that. How I was fighting to keep that Lowell School open,
Hmm.
and how happy I've always been that that school
Still there.
is still there, and still going, and the newer schools were closed. And what that's meant to that neighborhood is just
Yeah.
unreal, to think that it's helped hold that neighborhood together, and which it needed. And we disagreed on some of the things there, but that school has always had enough care and taken care of that it keeps on existing.
And the problem with the schools have closed, which were closed,